I have carried a lot of things out of a lot of bad places. Plasma dressings, tourniquet kits, 3-kilo chunk of hull plating I had to pry off a man's shin with both hands. Once, after the Orith corridor engagement, I carried a wounded Beth Saran conscript 1,200 meters to a field triage point because he was the only one who knew what atmospheric pound their artillery shells were using, and we needed that information. He was heavy. He smelled like copper and wet cardboard. He never said thank you. I did not expect him to. I'm telling you all of this because I want you to understand something about what I do and what I am a combat medic. I have been processing casualties, treating field wounded, and cataloging the personal effects of the recovered dead for 11 years. I do not cry at these things anymore. That isn't callousness, it's function. Crying takes time that somebody else needs. But there is one object I think about almost every night. It is small enough to sit in my palm. I found it 3 years into the Veth Saran conflict. During the mass casualty processing operation at Harkin Station, a converted ore platform we'd rigged for intake, assessment, and triage. We had 400 Veth Saran Kia to log that week. They fell in 2 categories: soldiers wearing full documentation harnesses, information printed automatically the moment you ran a scanner across them, and conscripts, who wore only a chest plate seal and whatever they'd stuffed behind it. The Veth Saran were a cataloging species. Every object in their culture carried a classification number. Every soldier in their army was a record. They had taken up arms against us not because they feared us or hated us, but because we had arrived without documentation, unclassified. In their administrative framework, unclassified meant non-entity, and non-entity had a legal status not unlike cargo. They had not been cruel about it. That made it worse in some ways. They were thorough. I was working the third table in the processing hall. Bright noon, light pouring down through the skylights in long clean columns, dust motes turning in the air, when I reached a Veth Saran conscript, male, approximate human equivalent of mid-40s, chest plate seal intact. Cracked the seal the standard way, ran the scanner across the harness interior, and ulcitum fell out. A card. Standard issue. Regulation laminated stock. Human-made. The kind of thing fleet personnel carry in a waterproof sleeve in case their comm unit goes down. Printed. Emergency contacts, medical alerts, blood type, unit designation. I had filled out a dozen of these myself over the years. This one read, in the upper right corner, 7 of 12. It was crisp, barely worn. Whoever had put it there had sealed it against the inner lining before the chest plate. Went on. So the card had never flexed. The front had the standard contact fields, all blank. The back. The back had a handwritten phone number in blue ink. Human script. The handwriting was small and even, the kind of writing a person does when they know what they're committing to paper and want it to last. Below the number, in the same hand, if found, please call. I am trying to come home. I held the card for a long time, longer than I should have, given the cue. There is a particular quality to found objects. Objects that have traveled further than they were meant to. Circumstances the person who placed them there could not have predicted. And this card had that quality so strongly that I could feel it in my sternum, not grief. Something older and quieter, the specific weight of a deliberate act. I ran the card through materials analysis. Fleet Standard Laminate Series 9. Cov brand ballpoint ink, discontinued 7 years ago. The handwriting was human. The conscript carrying it had been processed into Veth Saran service records 6 years prior as a non-combatant labor attachment. Their designation, prisoners they'd found useful, and had not yet classified into a more permanent status. He had been carrying this card for 6 years. I filed the card as recovered personal effects, flagged it for intelligence cross-reference, and went back to the queue. I had 270 more to process before my shift ended. But I thought about that card every day for the next 4 years. Intelligence cross-referenced the number against missing personnel databases. No match on active records. No match on KIA lists. They told me the number corresponded to a relay frequency used by civilian translators attached to the early contact missions. The ones who had gone in ahead of fleet, trying to establish documentation protocols with the Veth Saran before the conflict solidified. Most of those translators had never been recovered. The Veth Saran had a word for them, unresolved assets, which, in their language, practically an apology. The translator attached to the relay frequency that matched the number on the card was listed as Adinka, Yemi, civilian interpreter, first wave. Missing in action, confirmed absent status, 4 years and 7 months prior to the date I found the card. Not dead. Missing. There is a difference, and military bureaucracy is precise about the distinction, even when the practical effect feels the same. Kept a copy of the card number in my personal files. I know that is not standard procedure. I did it anyway. 14 months after I found the card, the Veth Saran Accord was signed. Not a surrender. They did not surrender. They reclassified. In their administrative framework, they found a status category for humanity that translated roughly as extant sovereign entity with provisional documentation. It was the most bureaucratic peace treaty in recorded history. And it held because it satisfied their fundamental need to assign us a number in their system. We became Entry 7 in the Outer Tier Sentient Register, provisional status, pending review. The reclassification opened the prisoner transfer protocols. Veth Saran labor attachments were to be repatriated through a series of transit relays. Over the following 18 months, the process moved slowly. Every transfer was logged, cross-referenced, stamped with 7 different classification codes, because the Veth Saran did nothing in fewer than 7 steps. I was assigned to the transit intake team at Forward Processing Station Kel Anvar, which handled returns from the deep system relays. I had requested the assignment. Command approved it without asking why. The returns came in waves. 40 here, 60 there. Some of them were in good physical condition, because the veterans had kept meticulous health records on their labor attachments, and had a genuine, bureaucratic interest in keeping their assets functional. Some of them were not in good condition. For reasons I do not need to specify, I treated what I could treat, and flagged what needed more than I had. The 9th wave, 7 months into the repatriation process, came through on a Tuesday afternoon. Bright late afternoon light slanting through the station's processing windows in long golden bars, the kind of light that makes even a converted ore dock look almost gentle. I was running intake on the right side queue. 53 individuals on processing. Number 41 stepped to my station, small woman, probably mid-30s, though the years had done their work. She was wearing a Veth Saran labor attachment uniform, gray, numbered, with a classification code stenciled across the left shoulder that I later found out meant translator, non-combatant, provisional senior status. She had a Veth Saran Relaycom unit clipped to her belt. She had not let them take it. She gave me her name without being asked. Yemi Adienka, civilian interpreter. First wave contact mission. She said it the way people say their name after a very long time of not being sure they'd get to. Say it to anyone who would write it down. I looked at her for a moment. Then I reached into my breast pocket and took out the card. I had kept the original. Not the copy I'd filed with intelligence, the original. The one I'd pulled from that dead conscript's chest plate 4 years ago. I shouldn't have had it. I had carried it anyway every day, 2 forward deployments, and 1 medical evac, and a peace treaty that took 11 months to produce 7 signatures. I set it on the counter between us. She looked at it. She didn't pick it up immediately. She looked at it the way you look at something you thought was gone. Then she said quietly, "He promised he'd pass it along." I didn't ask her to explain. She didn't need me to. She had put 12 cards in 12 chestplate seals over 4 years, 1 each time a Veth Saran conscript was released from labor assignment and returned to general service. She had found 12 individuals who, their own reasons, understood something about what it meant to carry a message across a distance too large for ordinary delivery. The Veth Saran had a concept for it, a duty of record, the obligation to ensure that documented information reached its destination even when the carrier's route changed. She had learned to speak that language. She had learned to speak it very well. She picked up the card. She turned it over. She read the handwriting on the back, her own, and she folded it once and put it in the pocket of the gray uniform. 7 of 12, she said. I was starting to think none of them made it. I processed her intake. I wrote down her name carefully, in full, and I made sure it was legible. Then I told her that we had a comm unit she could use to contact family, if she wanted to, and that there was food and a bunk and a doctor who was better at long-term assessment than I was. She said, "I'll take all of it." She walked through the intake door and into a station full of people who had been waiting to see what came back. I went back to the queue. I had 12 more to process before my shift ended, but I did not think about that card anymore after that. I didn't need to.